With the release of Season 3, Yor Forger is now back in the spotlight, and behind her kind-hearted exterior, she's a woman whose strength, speed, and skill set push her far beyond human limitations. So it's the perfect time to ask, how strong is Yor Forger really? But before that, if you like this type of content, sub up. The goal is 15k, thank you. First, let's start off with Yor's strength or attack potency. Among many absurd moments from Yor, there are feats like knocking out an assassin by flicking a small button at his neck with pinpoint force. And during a carnival game, Yor destroyed a strength test machine with a casual one-handed swing. And in one comedic dodgeball scene, her throw was so ferocious it literally broke down trees on impact. And later in that same episode, Yor's killer shot move was described as an arrow of light and was thrown with such force it created a water cleaving. But if you want to take a more recent example, even in the first episode of Season 3, Yor casually kicked away a small section of a building that collapsed onto her. These feats alone would comfortably place Yor around small building level to start. However, if you want to know what Yor's pure strength looks like, she can casually shatter every bone in an assassin's hand with a simple squeeze. But the best example is when she snaps a solid steel katana with her bare hands. To break a blade like that, you need an incredible amount of focus pressure, which is calculated to be between 8,800 and 10,300 kilograms, or roughly about 20,000 pounds. And this is pretty consistent, as in another instance, she hugged Yuri a bit too hard and accidentally broke 2 of his ribs. Next off, I want to talk about speed. So let's first break down Yor's reaction speed in the scene where she dodges turret fire from an automated defense system in the Cold White movie. Because the aircraft structure isn't clearly defined, we'll ignore spectral estimates and focus on measurable values: bullet velocity, fire rate, and Yor's reaction window. The turret behaves like a real-world close-in weapon system, firing 20 to 30mm rounds at about 1050 meters per second and 4000 to 6000 rounds per minute, and that 67 to 100 rounds per second, or 1 bullet every 10 to 15 milliseconds. If we assume Yor is about 10 meters away from the turrets, a shot reaches her in only 9.5 milliseconds. And if she's about 5 meters away because she's closing in, that drops to 4.8 milliseconds. For comparison though, a human visual reaction time averages on 200 milliseconds. So Yor is reacting over 20 times faster than any normal person, and even faster than sound can travel the same distance, which would be 29 milliseconds. So reacting in a 5 to 10 millisecond window doesn't mean she's moving at bullet speed, but she's perceiving and initiating movement within a supersonic speed reaction frame, essentially supersonic to possibly high supersonic reflexes from this scene. However, one that truly stands out is her tennis match. Initially, it just looked like a miss, but then the ball splits into countless perfectly sliced fragments, which means the racket was cutting the ball. So, how is that physically possible? A standard tennis ball is about 6.7 centimeters across, with a tough rubber core wrapped in felt. To shred it instantly would require enormous pressure from the racket strings, pressure far beyond what human muscles can generate. Even if we treat the strings like a dull cutting edge, the only way they could slice cleanly through rubber is if the impact force exceeded the ball's structure limits before it had time to move. So in simple terms, that would mean Yor's racket had to be moving so fast that the ball literally didn't have time to deform or deflect, it would just split apart. So, even if we assume the ball only moved about 1 millimeter before it broke apart, the racket's tip speed would need to exceed 7,000 meters per second. That's around Mach 20. That's easily in the superhuman tiers, which helps you visualize just how absurdly powerful your swing is meant to be. At that speed, the energy in the racket head alone would be in tens of megajoules, comparable to an explosive blast. But it's still manga math, so it's best interpreted as an exaggeration to showcase superhuman capabilities. But if you combine this with her other feats, such as launching a volleyball beyond the atmosphere and countering a literal cyborg that had insane gadgets and dodging a sniper shot she couldn't even have heard, Yor's perception and reaction times consistently rank in the hypersonic ranges. However, We need to remember Yor is an assassin and she brings an arsenal of skills and techniques to the table, the kind of hacks that make her an especially dangerous opponent. First off, Yor's durability and endurance or stamina is very high. For instance, she once sustained a gunshot wound to her backside during a mission. Not only did she survive it, but she patched herself up and continued on until the job was done, only later admitting the pain did put her in a foul mood. But during the cruise ship mission, Yor fought through waves of assassins for an extended period, sustaining only minor injuries despite constant combat. By the end of that, she had slaughtered over 2,000 assassins non-stop, coming away with nothing worse than a jammed finger, a swollen stab wound in her chest, and a bit of swelling on her face. However, even when things do connect, Yor has an incredible tolerance for pain. In one humorous case, she was accidentally hit by a moving car while carrying Becky. Yor was sent rolling across the pavement, yet she immediately got back up, caught Becky to shield the child from harm, and kept on running to the hospital as if nothing major happened. Yor literally shrugged it off with just a scratch on her cheek. But as an assassin trained by secret organization Garden, Yor also possesses a lethal skill set and refined techniques. In close quarter combat, she's a master martial artist, primarily favoring kicks and acrobatic maneuvers. Her hand-to-hand combat skills are so advanced that even Twilight or Lloyd Forger, the greatest spy in Wise, struggled to handle her attacks. In their playful spar, when Yor was drunk and momentarily thought she had to fight Lloyd, Yor's flurry of blows forced Lloyd completely on the defensive. And keep in mind, Lloyd is an extremely skilled combatant himself, yet even while holding back his punches, he found himself barely managing to parry Yor's kicks. And Yor, for her part, was intoxicated and not in peak form, which makes it even more impressive. But Lloyd wasn't trying to hurt his wife, of course, but the fact that he felt pressured says a lot about Yor's prowess. But one advantage Yor has is her unpredictable, unorthodox fighting style. Because she often has to conceal her abilities in daily life, when she does unleash her full skill set, it comes at a total shock to her enemies. We saw this creativity during her battle with the chain user on the cruise ship. Initially, Yor was hesitant, worried about Anya's presence and blowing her cover, which gave that assassin a momentary edge. But once Yor steeled herself, she turned the tables and caught the chains, wrapped him up in it, and struck precise pressure points on his body to paralyze him. It only took one sequence for her to turn the tables and paralyze him. Yor's knowledge on human anatomy and pressure point targeting is also evident in other instances, like when she subdued a rampaging cow with just a few well-placed jabs. These techniques are almost like a form of advanced martial arts or secret skills. However, another notorious example is that Yor can hit so hard and focused that it creates internal damage without a visible wound, essentially an internal shockwave strike. This kind of move highlights her assassin training, allowing her to eliminate targets swiftly and silently. But if this wasn't enough to showcase just how good of an assassin Yor is, another aspect of Yor's hacks is her instincts and senses. She has an almost preternatural ability to sense danger. Yor can detect the bloodlust or killing intent of others, allowing her to anticipate attacks before they happen. In fact, during the Princess Lorelei mission, Yor sensed the presence of enemies around her without any obvious cues at all, a sixth sense that goes beyond normal human awareness. This hyper-alertness combined with her raw speed is why assassins on that cruise ship couldn't catch her by surprise. Even if they approached her from a blind spot, Yor felt them coming. This kind of intuition is invaluable for someone in her line of work and makes her nearly impossible to ambush. And to keep adding on, Yor brings biological resistance and killer instinct shaped by her assassin upbringing in the Garden. She has been shown to tank a high voltage taser without flinching and came out unbothered through a gas cloud that could drop a rampaging elephant. But also, Yor consumed a martini full of blowfish poison, which has effects for several hours but only serves as a pain reliever and was shown to not be affected at all. This indicates resistance to both electrical incapacitation and lethal poison. However, she's ironically extremely vulnerable to alcohol, which makes her irrational and sloppy when drunk. But overall, she's stronger, faster, and more skilled than virtually anyone in the Spy Family universe. And don't get me wrong, Lloyd is strong as well, but Yor is on a whole nother level. But that's also what makes her both a terrifying assassin and a wonderful protective parent. She is the dual-wielding, high-kicking assassin mother. Although, if you guys want to see a video on Lloyd next, whether it be his intelligence or even strength, do let me know in the comments below.